Big, beautiful peace at last. The US and Iran have announced that they have reached an agreement that would take effect on Friday, 19th of June. President Trump authorized on social media the quote-unquote toll-free opening of the Strait of Hormuz and the immediate removal of US naval blockade. Let the oil flow, he declared. Meanwhile, Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister Kazem Garibabadi said on Sunday that the text for a peace deal brokered by Pakistan has been decided and would be up for signing in Switzerland on Friday, and that negotiations for a final agreement would be held during a 60-day period if the US commits to the current peace deal. Regardless of the details, is it mission accomplished for President Trump? Is it a Pyrrhic victory? I'm joined by Professor Warwick Powell, Adjunct Professor at Queensland University of Technology, joining us from Brisbane, Australia, and here in the studio, Gong, Professor of Economics at the University of International Business and Economics. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. First of all, Professor Powell, let me go to you. Exactly what is reportedly agreed upon? A peace deal? Some is calling this, or the text of a peace deal, or a memorandum of understanding. What exactly is the news about?
Well, look, it's a memorandum of understanding, Liu Xin, and which, of course, is not a final peace deal. A final peace deal, in theory, is some time away should the processes articulated through this MOU ultimately come to bear. But we're a long way short of that. At the moment, there is, of course, quite a little bit of optimism compared to the situation of recent times that at least the parties have been able to, through the good offices of Pakistan, come to some kind of an understanding. But we're talking about Friday before any signatures are committed, and a lot can happen over the course of the week. You know, there is an English saying which is many a slip betwixt a cup and a lip, and I think it is fair to say that over the course of the last 100 or so days, and in fact going back to the middle of last year, that there have been many occasions where ostensibly progress has been achieved, but ultimately founders, because of various particular factors, whether it's the United States itself being unable to ultimately come to an agreement, or whether it's because the conditions of an agreement have been scuppered by the ongoing activities of Israel in Lebanon. So let's be cautious about this, let's be hopeful, but there is a long time to go between Monday and Friday.
Professor Gong, exactly what's the process you understand that will take place until a final agreement can be reached? And when we talk about a final agreement, exactly what are we talking about? Are we talking about the war? Are we talking about Iran's nuclear program? What's the timetable you understand?
Well, at least I think this is part of the deal, even though technically we call it a memorandum of understanding, but I think it's pretty clear that it should be binding, pending, of course, both signing this MOU, that peace at least is coming to the Middle East. As far as Iran and the United States is concerned, I would say, and there's also other issues apparently haven't been totally worked out before reaching to this stage. Nevertheless, I think both sides sort of hurried up, and do this deal reportedly as a gift on the birthday for President Trump. Well, I hope, it's a great gift from President Trump to the entire world, I guess. Nevertheless, it's very clear that there are other issues that haven't been worked out yet and waits to be still negotiated. For example, concerning the handling of the remaining enriched uranium, and might be some other issues we don't know about yet. So before we have a full understanding of the text of this MOU, that hasn't even been released yet. We don't know exactly at what stage we are in this peace process, but nevertheless, I think the peace process has already started, and I think peace is indeed around the corner. If not already, we have peace as far as the United States and Iran is concerned. But certainly, what's going to happen to Israel, we still have to see. But I do want to bring up the issue that President Trump is on the record going public to publicly scold and essentially, I would even use the word humiliate Bibi Netanyahu about his bombing of southern Lebanon.
Professor Powell, for the United States, do you agree that there was a great sense of urgency for President Trump to to get it done? For the United States, is it really winning if they sign this agreement?
Look, I don't think the United States has won very much at all, and in fact, I would argue that the United States has experienced a significant and to some extent a humiliating defeat. It set about this particular war with the aim of overthrowing the Iranian government, either directly through aerial bombardments or ultimately through instigating a popular revolt. What's happened is that the Iranian government seems to have actually solidified despite the decapitation attacks successfully executed by the United States in late February. Ever since then, the United States has been on the back foot, and in fact, the regional capabilities of the United States in terms of its forward basing and its significant military infrastructure within the Middle East has been severely damaged or destroyed. This shows that the United States, in terms of how it sets about being a dominant hegemonic military power globally, has been severely undermined. So I don't think that there is much to write home about as far as the US is concerned. As for the nuclear file, so to speak, which ultimately became the big issue, you'll recall that last June, supposedly the United States, having dropped bunker-busting bombs, had destroyed the Iranian nuclear capability. It would prove to be untrue, of course. It was just hyperbole. And by the looks of what's being talked about insofar as this agreement is concerned, the issue of the nuclear file won't even be discussed until the latter part of or post-MOU signing. It's not part of this MOU signing. And again, I doubt that the United States is going to get access to the nuclear-enriched materials. Iran, on its part, of course, has consistently been of the view that it does have a right to develop nuclear-related capabilities, but not to a point of developing nuclear weapons, and it has made that very clear from day one. This was the case before the 28th of February, and it's likely to be the case after the 28th of February. In the meantime, the United States' actions have caused significant disruptions to global energy markets, fertilizer markets, and petrochemical markets, and has led to significant economic damage to itself as well.
So, Professor Gong, do you agree with Professor Powell's assessment that it actually, by not winning outright, it has been a defeat for the United States? If so, what went wrong, and what should be the biggest takeaway, although the White House, the Trump administration would never admit it?
Yeah, well, I would say that winning is always in the eye of a beholder. In the eye of President Trump, everything he did, everything he is committed to, is always being a winning thing for him. He would portray this, of course, as something winning for the United States. But I totally agree with Warwick that at the end of the day, if you look back, what America has achieved, certainly it is very much short of its original objectives. It has made the situation even worse. From that perspective, you can say that the United States is not winning. I think the very fact that a nation, even though it has a long history with a very large population, is able to stand up to the biggest power on Earth, on the planet Earth, and still survive as a nation and you negotiate on equal terms with the United States is something, at least a victory for the other side. Paints a sort of debatable picture about whether America indeed wins or not. I think from our perspective, certainly the United States is not winning. I think its reputation, its stance, and the stature internationally has been greatly damaged in this case.
In the eyes of countries in the region and American allies around the world, Professor Powell, what do you think is the biggest takeaway they are contemplating now?
Well, the first takeaway is that any promises that the United States makes in terms of being able to provide defensive capabilities and deterrence capabilities needs to be taken with a grain of salt. The United States had something like 16 military bases dotted across this entire region as its forward base, a significant military commitment, which was buttressed with the movement of a number of key offensive fleets into the region to deliver salvos. And none of them were able to successfully deter Iran. None of them were able to successfully undermine Iran's response functions. And ultimately, we've seen America pack up, temporarily perhaps, but certainly pack up its military presence in the bases in the region. So first things is that American promises to defend allied countries is, I think, very, very questionable. This applies across the globe, by the way, including in Southeast Asia. The second thing it tells countries of a region is that they would probably be much better off thinking about developing security architectures designed by themselves together with partners and other countries in the region. This is about countries realizing that they need to work with their neighbors as opposed to falling into the trap of forming blocks against different neighbors. And I hope that that is a lesson not only learned in the Middle East, but also learned across the rest of the world as well.
Professor Powell, Professor Gong, very briefly, what do you expect to happen from now till the final, if any, agreement reached within about Iran's nuclear program? What would the biggest factor X be?
Well, I think the biggest unknown and the biggest factor that I'm concerned about is the Israeli factor. Certainly, the Israeli side is not happy about this development, and what are they going to do to support President Trump, or maybe to try to derail President Trump's attempt? That's still very unknown, and hopefully, the United States will still be able to exercise some control over, Tel Aviv, over Jerusalem, to the extent that fighting will not be resumed again. From Iranian's perspective, this is a whole thing. I mean, the peace agreement is premised upon peace in the region, and not just directly with Iran. It's in the whole region. It have to peace with the Hezbollah in Lebanon. So all of these have to be addressed at the same time. So that's a big challenge. But I'm still hopeful that at least the United States is trying to get away from this. I mean, you see very clear, President Trump doesn't want to be boiled down in this war again. J.D. Vance doesn't want to be boiled down in this war again. They're trying to find a way for an exit ramp, and you have to have this exit in dignity. And I think this peace deal, at least this MOU, provides the first step of a process that is able to let America leave with some grace and with some dignity here.